business meeting of Richmond Community Schools. If you'd please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We could have the reading of the mission and vision, please.
Richmond Community Schools guide students on pathways of learning to a future of limitless possibilities.
Vision of Richmond Community Schools is a community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for lives of choice, purpose, and service.
Thank you, Mr. Walton and Mr. Morey. Ms. Claypool, is there any public commentary?
There is not.
Public commentary. Moving on to item 3, consent items. We have Jennifer?
Yes, thank you. Tonight, I have for you 3.01, approval of the minutes, 3.02, human resources with the addendum there before you at your seat, 3.03, accounts payable, 3.04, the monthly financial report, and 3.05, transfers.
Make a motion that we accept the consent items as presented.
Motion by Jeff Slifer.
Second.
Second by Aaron Stevens. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Moving on to action items. Mrs. O'Brien?
The first action item for you tonight are donations presented there before you for a total of $8,985.76. At this time, I ask for a motion to approve the donations.
I'll motion that we move to accept the donations.
Motion by Brad Walton,
I'll second.
second by Keith Morey. Any questions or comments?
Just the usual appreciation for lots of folks stepping up and helping us out.
Thank you to the community. Agreed. Anything else? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Moving on to 4.02, robotics camp. Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes. Tonight we bring to you a request. Amy Vance Middlesworth, who is a teacher at Hibbard, would like to host a robotics camp for 6 Hibbard female students. There's no charge for the camp. The dates are June 7th through the 10th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And the camp will be held at Hibbard. The camp is possible thanks to the Women's Fund of the Wayne County Foundation. So at this time, I ask for approval of robotics camp at Hibbard.
I move that we approve the camp.
Motion by Nicole Stoltz,
Second.
second by Aaron Stevens. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Item 4.03, request to advertise for mental health proposals.
Thank you. This is our yearly request that comes from Mrs. Hobbs, the Director of Exceptional Education, to advertise the request for proposals for mental health services related to the student support. The mental health services is a link to our student success, and we would like to maintain this service and provide an opportunity for a competitive proposal process. If the request to advertise is approved, we will accept proposals on Wednesday, June the 16th at 2 p.m. with a recommendation to the board at the following board meeting. So at this time, I ask the board to approve the request for proposal for mental health services.
I'll move that we approve.
Motion by Keith
second.
Morey, second by Nicole Stoltz. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Item 4.04, Communities in Schools, CIS, MOU. Mrs. O'Brien.
Yes, tonight I bring to you the attached agreement for services with communities and schools for the 21-22 school year for your consideration. Just a reminder, last year we had the original agreement, which you'll see here before you. There's no change in the cost. We came back later in the summer and with an addendum to that original MOU, which included some additional hours at the building. We added a second site coordinator at the high school, and we added a site coordinator at Hibbard as well. And so tonight I'm bringing to you not only the original proposal, but also the addendum for both of those, but one approval, which will continue our original services, but will also be a continuation of the additional services that we put in place last summer. And again, there's no change to the costs from last year. So at this time, I recommend the board approve the community schools agreement as presented.
I motion we approve the CIS MOU.
Motion by Brad Walton,
I'll second.
second by Nicole Stoltz. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Item 4.05, revised contract supplement and revised teacher contracts for the superintendent. I guess,
Yes.
go ahead, or, okay.
So at this time, I ask the board to approve the revised contract supplement and teaching contract for the superintendent as presented. I would just add that our normal contractual years run from July 1 to June 30th, as they do in several corporations. While we're very eager to have Dr. Wright here full-time, we do realize that he is transitioning from another position. We're fortunate that we are going to have him here some days in June, which is the reason for the supplement. But we are looking at an adjustment for a start date of July 1 that we will have him here full-time. So at this time, I asked again that the board approve the revised contract supplement and teaching contract for the superintendent as presented.
I move
Go ahead.
I move to approve 4.05, contract supplement and revised teacher contract as presented.
I'll
Motion
second.
by Aaron Stevens, second by Brad Walton. Any questions or comments? I'll just add, I think I'm thankful for the board to be flexible in Dr. Wright's Pike Township, and I think this is, we're getting a lot of release days. He can spend time here. He's been here several days already through May, and so I think this has been an excellent collaboration, and will pay dividends going forward. Anything else?
Glad he can be here.
And we're excited. First night in person here at the table.
Having a lot of fun.
Yes.
He's been busy today.
So, seeing no additional questions or comments, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Moving on to the consulting agreement, 4.06, Mrs. O'Brien.
So that leads us up to the next agenda item, which is the consulting agreement. So we do have days that Dr. Wright will be here in district working. The consultant agreement is to be able to compensate him for those days worked, since we're now moving the start of the contract to July 1. So at this time, I ask the board approve the consulting agreement as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Aaron Stevens,
I'll second.
second by Brad Walton. Any questions or comments? I'll just add again, I'd like to thank Mr. Cross for working with us on the whole contract process, including these last minute changes. That's very, very helpful.
More than welcome. When you've been here, you have quite a library of forms that are hopefully easily appropriated.
That sounds like a negotiation tool for a discount to me.
I think he's earned every penny this year. Any other questions or comments?
No, Rod is very reactive and has done very well, so we are very lucky to have someone with his intelligence and experience. So
extremely
There,
low.
did I cover myself?
Keep going, Jeff, keep going, you know.
I mean, to have, you know, our personal attorney doesn't react quite so quickly. But thank you very much, because I know I've had some late night calls. Seeing no additional questions or comments, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Item 4.07, Q7 interior design proposal for McGuire Hall. Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes, thank you. Tonight, I recommend the board approve the Q7 proposal for interior design services for McGuire Hall as presented. I will note that the services will be paid with funds for the Redevelopment Commission McGuire Hall project, and also to note that Q7 is the group that worked with the Art Museum, with McGuire Hall being an extension of that facility. Tonight, I recommend the board approve, again, the proposal, the Q7 proposal for interior design services for McGuire Hall is presented.
Motion approves Q7 interior design proposal.
Motion by Brad Walton,
Second.
second by Jeff Slifer. Any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Having the chance to be involved with Q7 just on a limited basis, just because of the project that we started, I did appreciate. I mean, we already changed the colors over McGuire Hall, and we had a better visual representation at a meeting a week or so ago, and I kind of appreciated the check and balance that we had with his experience and his work on McGuire, or the Art Museum already. So it was kind of nice to have that as a check and balance with the architect that we were working with. So I appreciated that.
I've been impressed with the level of professionalism and, yeah, just really enjoy the continuity we're gonna have between those two facilities, so.
I appreciate the facilities group and the board, and I guess the contact now is John Hamilton. Is that correct? For Q7?
I didn't know that, but that's fine.
I think we're still, Jennifer and I and John are kind of all still
Yeah, I
connecting with
wouldn't wanna bypass.
Q7.
I like having the board contact. I think that's
So,
Well, I don't know if that's entirely appropriate, but, I mean, I think we just need to make sure we're following the chain of command. So I think John's job is,
I think that's something that we should discuss further.
okay,
And we would need
Because I
to consult with
definitely-
Ron. That's really a
yeah.
consulting with Ron for that.
I just want to be careful moving forward that we're kind of in the right lanes.
Right, but we're also hiring consultants that follow our vision and our thought process, so bypassing board members is not good either. So, but we'll talk about it later.
I don't think that was my suggestion. I think the school contact, though, should be very clear and obvious. All right, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Moving on to policy review and update. 5.01, policy 7660, transportation by private vehicles, second reading and approval. Motion by Aaron Stevens.
I move to approve policy 7660 on second reading.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Nicole Stoltz, second. All those in favor, or any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Moving on to item 5.02, alcohol policies and related documents.
Okay,
Brian?
yes, so you have received this information a few weeks ago to take a look at. I'm asked Mr. Cross to review as well. So I have everything listed here tonight, so we can kind of go over everything you know, some of these don't normally require board approval, but I felt like because this is new for all of us, that if we have, you know, on the books and in the minutes, so we have something to refer to, so we're all on the same page about what that process will be. Okay. So the first item is policy 6436, which is the sale of alcohol. We had worked through with Mr. Cross and had lengthy conversations. We put it on hold with COVID. We came back to it. And then eventually the board did approve the changes in November of 2020. Knowing that moving forward that we would have some additional work to do in terms of facilities and just our processes. One of the things that we talked about in developing that board policy is that we wanted to make sure that there was a check and balance system in place, and felt that it would be appropriate to bring any requests for alcohol to the board for approval before that facility's use was finalized. So that's what we're here to talk through tonight. So again, that's just reference to policy 6430 that was approved back in November of 2020. I'm not recommending any changes to that policy. I'm just including it just as a reference, as our guide point of why we're moving forward from there. So knowing that that any time that you change a policy, especially something, a significant change on that level, it's going to impact other board policies. And so so that was the next task, is to go through and see which policies that this would impact. I would remind, and it's carried over in all of the changes in the documents, that this does not apply to any corporate sponsored events. So these would not be RCS events that we would have the sale of alcohol. This would be events such as the art museum, the symphony, a class reunion, those type of requests. And again, all of those will come to the board for approval as we work through those.
If I could just pick up on that, I think as you look through all the documents, keep that distinction in mind. There's a difference between RCS sponsorship of an event and this board consenting to an event that is not RCS sponsored, but at which there will be alcohol made available in accordance with the provisions of the policy and the various other supporting documents.
Okay, so the first policy change would be policy 3122.01, drug-free workplace. You can see the highlighted change. So again, as we just referenced, so where it says it says while on corporation property or while involved in any corporation related activity or event. And then it does indicate now, except to the extent that an RCS employee is an attendee at an event that has been approved by the board pursuant to policy 6436, and the employee's attendance at that event does not involve his or her performance of RCS work related activities. So for example, if an employee went on the weekend to a reception at the art museum, to a class reunion, that kind of thing, so that language has been added to that policy. Any comments or questions?
It doesn't make any, it doesn't make any difference. What if he's invited, what if they are invited to the event to represent RCS?
If they were.
Well, it says if it does not involve his or her performance of RCS work-related activities. So if you're being invited on behalf of your work, you know, as a school employee, then you wouldn't be basically a citizen participant in that event.
And therefore you would not be able to
Partake,
yeah.
yes.
And we can make that more clear if that, because that's a good question. I think that was the intent, I know.
Right.
But the term work-related activities might be a little too narrow. We may need to clarify that.
Just a thought I had. Because I could see that happening. I could see. Hopefully.
So like being invited as a representative of the,
Well, I'm thinking
Or,
like if
or
you,
to speak on behalf of Richmond Community Schools, or to,
I'll give you an example. Program at Civic Hall, and there's a reception afterwards that may serve alcoholic beverages. And we are each invited as school board members with a special seating.
so based on this policy, we would not, right?
Mhm.
We would not be able to partake in drinks. Agreed, right?
correct.
What's your thought, Ron?
That was the intent of the policy.
Yeah,
Whether
that's-
the policy's clear enough on that or not is an open question, and I think Jeff's
But even
question
if
is good.
the reception is after the event?
It's still part of the event.
Okay.
So my question is that what we want?
Yeah, that's not required, is that what you want? We can make the policy
Right, we can.
comport to the board's wishes, obviously.
Well, Jeff.
I just want to.
It's a valid
We just need to
question.
make sure
Right,
that
yeah, it's a great,
I mean,
if I'm a board member and I go over to RAM, am I allowed to have a glass of wine at the celebration or not?
Well,
What
if you're-
happens if I drink too much?
And my thought on that, my thought, if understanding this as it is, if you're invited, if you go over, because you are a board member, but it's a function, but you're not invited specifically as a board member, representing the board.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. This is
Yeah.
more about representing our RCS, not in attendance.
And that's why I brought up, that analogy.
At the board level, that's one level. What if the superintendent or administrator is at a professional event, where alcohol is served, and I know that happens in some degree of regularity. What are the expectations? I think those things need to be better addressed now than after the fact, obviously.
Especially before an incident occurs, or hopefully doesn't occur. Well, I'm just looking for the clarity of it, so.
Well, I'd offer to provide clarifying language, but Nicole's comment makes me think that that's the next step, once you determine what,
right, we
as a
need to
board, what
decide
you
what we
to
want.
clarify.
So, what do we want?
Well, this just simply says if you're representing RCS at an event at an RCS facility, you're expected not to drink, right?
Yes. That was
And
the intent.
I think there is a direct distinction between my analogy of a function at Civic Hall, where we are invited as board members representing the board with special seating or something like that, as opposed to Jeff's analogy of going to a function being held by RAM and wine being served or something like that. If we're not there specifically as board members or with expectation of the invitation to come as board members, I think that there's, the one as opposed to Jeff's are distinct and different. That's my thought.
And that was the intent, and even in the same facility, if the board was represented, so for example, at the symphony, and the symphony wanted to do something and invited the board, you had special seating, you were part of that, then according to this policy, you would not partake. If you decide on your own as a resident of the area that you want to go to the symphony, you buy a ticket and you're at the symphony, then you're not representing the board, so then this would not apply.
Or an alumni event.
Correct.
Alumni
A reunion,
Fundraiser,
Alumni associations and fundraisers.
a class reunion, right.
which would typically not have RCS. I
Right.
mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, that's the gray. I don't know, Ron, what do you think?
He's going to default to.
He's
back to
gonna
her
say,
question.
what do we want to do?
And not just for board members, but the intent was for employees as well. Because, if an employee is,
Anyone.
If it's, a joint concert between, the one of the music departments, you know, in the corporation in the symphony, then that's a different acting capacity than if that employee, again, goes on their own because they
Right.
choose to.
Right.
And so,
I think,
Or if there's an ISBA regional meeting at Welliver's or whatever it's called now.
True.
What is your expectation? Again, that's what you have to decide. You're there obviously in some official capacity.
So why don't we pass it as stands tonight, and then if we collectively decide we want to change it, we could have Ron look at that?
Yeah.
Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah, 'cause but isn't this just for while on corporation property? I mean, I think that's a different issue,
With Welliver's?
like a Welliver's. And I think it's reasonable to ask people that are in an official capacity representing RCS on RCS property at an event that has alcohol, that they do not drink. I mean, I think right or wrong, I think it's reasonable.
I mean, considering the fact that when we go to ISBA's conferences or NSBA's, we go to receptions and everything, but we're there in official capacity as representatives of Richmond Community Schools, Board of Schools trustees. That would mean that even though separate from our location here, that we would not be able to.
well, that's every conference, every employee in the school
Well,
system.
I mean, I don't even think the policy directly addresses it because it is predicated upon 6436, which itself is limited to events on school corporation.
School property.
I think
To me,
this,
it's a school
which
property.
then you
is
would
the
approve.
Thing. I mean, I'm not saying, if there's another event off grounds, I think it's.
My delving off into those other extraneous examples probably wasn't a good idea.
Well, I think, Nicole, I think that's reasonable to approve it as is, and if we want to revisit.
I can agree with that.
I agree.
Do we need a
So
motion?
do we need to vote through these individually, or?
That's up to you. We can, let's just go ahead and do
Yeah.
that, because we know that one we'll need to take to second reading. The other policy, we know there's no changes. I just, as reference, helping us talk through it, will speak to some of those, even though they don't require approval.
Okay. Thank you.
So let's go ahead.
So if I could entertain a motion to accept the policy as modified policy.
so we're gonna do each piece of this and move each piece to a second read? Is
You'll
that-
find that there's not a lot that will,
There's just a couple
will,
that need.
yeah,
think
that,
there's
just the
three.
actual policy changes.
Okay,
I think there's only 3.
okay.
I'll make the motion that we accept the modification and move it to second reading.
So, policy 3122.01, motion by Jeff Schleifer, second by Brad Walton. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the changes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you.
All right, next is policy 8160, the public attendance at school events. There are no recommended changes to this policy, other than for you to be aware that this was a policy that was reviewed to see if changes needed to be made. But it does reference, and already has the language for corporations, events sponsored by the corporation, so that policy is fine as it stands. If there are any questions about that.
So do we need to approve that too, or is it?
No, because there's no change.
change
It's
on
just
it.
informational.
Okay.
But would that be part of our just regular update? If we move that to second read, will we just freshen that one? I mean, it says,
We
think
just,
she-
we just updated it. We updated it in January of 2020.
okay,
If you want to move it to first reading, and second with no changes, it could have a new date of,
I think I'd prefer to
Of May.
just stick to the 3 policies that have changes for
Okay.
today, if that's okay with the board. Just to keep the a little cleaner.
yeah. And again, we work through these and, it'll come back up as we need it to. But it was just approved about a year ago. The next is administrative guideline 8160 that goes along with this policy. This does not need approval, but I just wanted you to see the changes of that as well. We're adding the language where it says, we're adding the language at corporate sponsored events. And again, that's that consistency. You know, it had, raffles are not something that we're permitted to do anyway, so that's old language that needed to be. And then the other two references, one, we don't ever remember a time like when this has occurred. I mean, we can leave it in there as far as patrons in. Usually, if we have personnel in uniform, they've been invited, and so usually that's kind of an assumed rather than it having to be in there. So I don't know that it's really necessary. The second piece in letter D is just a little deceiving because it says the board will honor athletic passes for all corporations which are members of conferences in which the teams of this corporation compete, and which honor the passes of the corporation. So that makes it sound like any of the teams that are in the NCC that we would accept their all sports pass. And that's really not the case. We do receive a few NCC passes, not a lot. I mean, but those are usually, you know, for administration. For example, it gets the athletic director, Mrs. Wolpe, into an event with a pass. But the way this is kind of written, it makes it sound like we would take any athletic pass from any corporation, and that has not been practiced. So,
I mean, it almost sounds like as if for every home game we have
yeah,
in the conference,
we would take
we would not be charging admission for
correct.
parents.
If you had a season ticket at your home school. So
Yeah.
that has not been past practice. You know, it's in a guideline, so that's being removed again. But the guidelines, I just wanted you to be aware of that for information purposes. Okay, and then guidelines going along with policy 6510, the use of school facilities, and that go along with the policy of 6436, alcohol-free facility policy. Again, you'll see the language just adding in that corporate sponsored events. So that's mainly the change there. Our funding has changed, and so we've updated that language just so now it references like the operation fund. Again, some of our, I think there wasn't a reference to a technical director, so just some of those job titles have been updated as well, but not a lot of language changes there until you get to there is some language, and we'll see that goes along with the facility use agreement, but it says it's the general policy of the school board that all facilities of Richmond Community Schools shall be alcohol-free. Alcohol is not permitted at corporate-sponsored events. However, the board recognizes that the community groups and organizations may benefit from the sale or distribution of alcoholic beverages at sponsored events at RCS venues made available for use or rental. In accordance with Policy 6436, the lawful sale or distribution of alcoholic beverages must be approved by the Richmond Community Schools Board of Trustees and meet the alcohol requirements outlined in the Richmond Community Schools request for approval for alcohol sales form. The Richmond Community Schools request for approval for alcohol service form must be completed and submitted at least 30 days prior to the event and shall be submitted in accompaniment with the permit of use of school property short-term use agreement. It says a copy of the liquor liability insurance policy and a $500 refundable security deposit must be provided at the time of this request. Property liability insurance certification is also required and accompanies the permit for use of school property short-term use agreement. Event sponsors organizations shall provide the name of the entity holding the requisite event or catering permit issued by the Indiana Alcohol and Tobacco Commission under which such alcoholic beverages will be sold or distributed, and the permit number and expiration date. Security personnel are required. The number and type of security personnel who will be present at the event must be indicated at the time of the request. Security personnel shall be present at least 1 hour before and after the scheduled event starting and ending times. The sale of alcoholic beverages shall end at least 1 hour prior to the scheduled end of the event.
Just so our public knows, where is this form going to be? Where can they attain it?
This will be, it's actually located in board docs, but this will be part of our process. So when we have someone that asks to request a facility, that's basically the language that explains in the form the things that are required. So that will accompany when there's a request as well.
So they could go on to our website and go to board docs and get that?
Yes,
Is
they
what you're
can
saying?
find that. But most people, I mean, the quickest way to do it is most people, if they want to, usually they'll go through Warner, facilitates all of those, if they're, or through the athletic director or through Mrs. Wolpe.
Okay.
So usually the high school, they work with Mr. Hamilton for those, but usually it's, depending on the facility that they want to request, it usually goes either through the high school, or through Warner.
I would just kind of give the board a heads up that in preparing some of this stuff, I tried to consult with city and the Parks Department and their experiences at McBride with the Roosters and what have you. So this may, particularly the forms and the applications, may be a work in progress as we see that there may be some things that, while they look okay on paper, maybe don't work really well in the real world. So just keep that in mind. We want the policy to be enforced, but we don't want to defeat the purpose of it by making it so impossible to comply with that class 3 unions aren't going to consider us because it's too much of a hassle.
And thank you both for your work on those forms. I know that's been a collaborative effort.
All right, so the next is the permit for use of school property. So this is what the actual form looks like now. And so if someone wants to request the use of one of our facilities, this is the form that they complete. So now there's some additional thing, like, for example, they're just going to check if they want alcohol service as well. Since we are in the process, we did make a change to the security fee, and that just correlates with raises that were given. On the second page, one of the things that was also that was talked about in conjunction with this form that does not necessarily go along with the alcohol policy is just the use of, if you're using one of the facilities for physical activity, there is now an accompanied warning for that as well, and you can see that attached. And again, it says, in addition to this agreement, the request for approval for alcohol services is required when requesting the alcohol service. So this is the first step. So, for example, we have a reunion, and say they want to request for the summer, and they say, we'd like to have maybe a little reception and have a meet and greet at McGuire Hall. We want to walk through the high school, take a tour, and then we're going to serve food and have most of our festivities in the cafeteria. So when they call to request, this is the first form that they'll receive. They'll check off, when their event is, what the hours, what spaces they want to use. Then they're going to be checking, yes, we would like alcohol service. So that's going to prompt then that we know, okay, you've checked that you would like alcohol at one of the venues that you're selecting. So now that prompts an additional form. So then if you'll go to or look at the Richmond Community Schools request for approval for alcohol services. So the language that was in the guideline, that's so we have it in writing, but that's really the writing and explanation to what's being required on this form. So we have it in writing in the guidelines. But for the form, it says, in accordance with policy 6436, the lawful sale or distribution of alcoholic beverages must be approved by the Richmond Community Schools Board of Trustees and meet the requirements outlined in this form. As was stated earlier in the guidelines, the form must be completed and is submitted at least 30 days prior to the event and shall be submitted in accompaniment with the permit of use of school property short-term use agreement, and that's the form we just talked about. So you have the contact person, the event sponsor or organization, name, phone number, email, the areas that they are requesting to use, and we talked about, but the board wanted, would consider, we said, you know, McGuire Hall, Civic Hall, Tiernan Center, and maybe an outdoor area on the campus of the high school were probably the ones that we were going to get the most requests for, but that the board would have the option to consider other requests, so there is a space for that as well. An event description, the date, the beginning time, ending time, the number in attendance, and again, as we stated earlier, the sale of alcoholic beverages shall end at least 1 hour prior to the scheduled end of the event. The type of alcoholic beverages to be served, such as beer, wine, spirits, so if it is going to be sold or distributed, the name of the entity holding the requisite event or catering permit issued by the Indiana Alcohol and Tobacco Commission, under which such alcoholic beverages will be sold or distributed, the permit number, the expiration date, a copy of the liquor liability insurance policy, and a $500 refundable security deposit must be provided at the time of the request. Property liability insurance certification is also required and accompanies the permit for use of school property short-term use agreement. So then there's a checkoff to show that both of those things were received, the number of security personnel and the type of personnel that are being provided, and then there'll be a request denied, request approved, and then signature of the board president. So once these forms are received, they would be presented to the board as an action item with a description of what the event is, does it meet the criteria, and then the board can decide whether to deny or approve the request.
So the timing of it is they need to make sure that they have all of their information, including liability information and all of that.
30 days prior to the event.
Prior
And
to 30
we'll
days.
also, as we're working through this, we'll have to be cognizant of our board dates as well.
Well, because some of those processes will add some days to it, so.
That's what I was wondering, is if it, I almost wonder if it doesn't need to be more days in advance to just, I mean, somebody submits this tomorrow or the day after our, I don't know.
Well,
I guess
even
we'd
if,
still hit.
and that's what, I mean, that's kind of where and we, again, this is a work in progress. If we see
Sure.
that timeline's not working for us and we need to adjust it, but I was thinking the same thing because, you know, for example, the month of June, we only have one board meeting. But even if they were to submit it now, we would still be able to hit that. It wouldn't necessarily be just 30 days prior to the event. So the board meeting may be closer, you know, I don't know, to the event.
Yeah, because by the time they go through their vendor, go through their insurance company, get all that documentation, they're gonna have a little bit of time involved in that as well, so.
And I think we could, if there was a case that seemed more questionable, you know, we could pull the board if it looks like we would not approve. I mean, I think the anticipation is we want to approve these. And
Right.
so, but if there's something that seems borderline, we could try to just to give them some more time.
Yeah. Well, and I would anticipate too, I mean, we would be, I mean, it's open communication with the board, and so when one of these requests, so if we received one tomorrow, we wouldn't wait until the June board meeting to let you know that, hey, this is what we received.
And I would expect that we will find, as time goes by, that a lot of these entities that are wanting to do this will basically contract with caterers that have the permit already in place. And as those caterers learn how to deal with our rules, I think it can become a very smooth process. But again, as I said earlier, there may be some devilish details that we have to work out early on.
So that takes us through all the changes. Is there enough, do we have to approve something else now?
Well, I mean, I wanted it just to be located in all one place. I can defer to Mr. Cross. I do know that the one policy that we're changing, and that has already gone through. The rest of the guidelines and even some of the forms don't usually go for board approval. If we want to go ahead and just do a one-time motion for the
administrative guidelines, I wish we would, only because
yes.
at the time I drafted the original policy, you notice its effective date was the later of the approval of the policy or the preparation of administrative guidelines that were, in this instance, to be approved by the board. I felt like the nature of the issue was such that even though I don't want to infringe upon the superintendent's ability to develop administrative guidelines and just make them available to the board as an FYI, I thought in this instance the board needed to approve that administrative guidelines.
So
And I just wanted I wanted the board to be aware, and I wanted you to see everything that I looked at, whether I made a change to it or not, if I felt like it related to the policy, whether it was a guideline, a policy, or a form, so that you would have everything and see the whole picture.
So we've already moved the 3122 to second read, correct?
No.
No?
Yeah.
Yeah, 312201, and Ron can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I would recommend a motion for
All of these
the
policies?
approval of the
These and
guidelines and
accompanying
related documents,
Yeah, that's what I
but
was
it
thinking.
wouldn't need a second reading. That could be a
entire-
one-time
Okay.
vote, knowing that we can always, it's a work in progress, we can change it.
So
But
I
I
would-
think we could do a one-time, that way we have it documented that this is the process, here are the forms we're using, here are the guidelines. We'll take the other policy for second reading.
I would ask for a motion for approval of alcohol policies and related documents.
Yes. I will motion to approve all alcohol policies and related documents.
I'll
Motion
second.
by Brad Walton, second by Nicole Stoltz. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. That
Yes.
was, I should have said it in, but I know there was a lot of work by Mr. Cross and
Thank you for your hard work.
staff that kind of had the package, if you will. Moving on to board reports and discussion. Go around the table. Do we have any reports due? I know we got a little bit of a time crunch today, but we will, seeing none, we'll move on to preview of upcoming meeting and events. Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes, our next board meeting will be Wednesday, June the 16th at 5:30. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but just a reminder that there is only one board meeting the month of June.
And that is on the 16th, which is not a regular meeting date.
That is correct.
And while we will stay in our meeting for the interviews, do we want to do our bell ringer now?
We can. Our bell ringer, school ends tomorrow, and just with that, summer school starts next week. So, but I do want to say a thank you to all of the students, staff, and stakeholders, including the Wayne County Health Department, for their help, commitment, and support as we have navigated this school year. So on that, I say thank you to all.
I would concur.
Have we gotten any, are we starting the school year with the students wearing masks?
We don't know that at this time. We will be continuing masks in summer school, so that's as far out as we did just get confirmation on that as well. And we'll be sharing that information.
And the Board of Health Thursday's meeting recommended continuation of the masking policy for public buildings. Essentially, the numbers indicate that based upon our level of inoculation, roughly you can assume that for every 3 adults you encounter, 2 of them will not have been vaccinated. We're just about a little better than 1/3, about 37-38% in the county. So we hope that improves over time.
Yes.
And so far, there's been no talk of incentivizing it from the state authorities, at least.
A lot to. So I guess I will take a pause. Yes.
Mr. President, in the fact that it's approximately 6:20, 6:21,
Yes.
I would move that we recess for approximately 5 minutes or so prior to going into our interviews.
Yes, and we will start at 6:30, so I encourage everyone to please be in your seat ready to go. We'll reconvene the room. I think some of the, I think you're
We moving
leaving.
stuff around.
Well, the problem is,
Might-